we took, and the talk at the end of our trip were very interesting. It was about interdisciplinary community resiliency, and I thought that was like an important takeaway from both the messages that like one institution, one agency can't really do resiliency on its own. It's very much a coordinated effort across dimensions.
Yeah, impressive. Yeah, this is a first piece of mastery for me, and I learned a lot about the composition of ecosystem. That's why my question was regarding the how it's changing over the elevation, and we have seen that the adiabatic lapse rate at the top of the mountain is really low than the bottom. So it's linking with the theory and practice we have seen. And we have seen the composition, especially the tree composition over there and the bottom. There is a significant change in the undergrowth, and at the bottom there is very little undergrowth. But whatever we are at the top, we have seen a lot of moss, different kind of compositions are there. But the dominant tree species is only one type, which can withstand with this kind of weather condition. So, lovely. Any question about the Mansfield tree? I'm not the right person. Yes, please. Any question? Any follow-up? That's why we are tying the Mount Mansfield tree.
I just think it stands with it. Something you said made me think about also the other connection between the research and the community in Waterbury, and how they're both limited and also to some degree like funded by government structures. And I think that ties into some of our reading today. Like, what are the leverage points to change those, to make them more adaptable and applicable to community resilience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially if we can spend more time in Waterbury, that would be really helpful, because the Liz Shalgal, she was really a resource person, and her talk was really articulated a lot of avenue of thinking that was food for thought. How community resilience are working together, or is it driven by state or agencies, or it is individually driven by the community. That's why I also asked her about the community-driven initiatives, but we have seen very little about this kind of community initiatives rather than the state-driven top-down approaches. And we have seen some dilemma in implementation process about funding from the FEMA and their adaptive measures. So still, I'm learning. I'm also in your table about these kind of issues, and how we can put some leverage point, and how we can enhance the capacity to withstand this kind of shocks and stresses. That is also important to learn and understanding. Yeah. So one of our graduate students is working with this Waterbury community. Liu, I know many of you, is in second year master's student, and I'm also planning to work on this Waterbury later on to dig into this kind of notion of the community resilience, and how this kind of resilience attributes are working or not. Any other? Yes, please.
I just thought it was like such a good example of how like all of these different things are linked. Like, we started at the mountain and are doing like super ecological like plant research, like looking at that, and then like someone's doing research for the U.S. Army, to look at snowfall, all the way down to like, we heard the talk about how like politics are involved, and the governor played down the severity of the second flooding event to encourage tourism, and how that's related, and they need money from tourism to be able to repair from the flooding, and then all the different like barriers to repair there are, and FEMA funding. Like, I think it was just like a great example of like how complicated resilience is. It's not just like one thing. And you can't look at each thing as a siloed issue, like human resilience, ecological resilience, all this stuff. and climate change, like they really all interact together. I think it was the whole day like really tied that idea together for me.
Wonderful explanation and the connecting all dots. Yeah, that's why we would say the resilience component is not something isolated and inbuilt within the social ecological system, because you cannot isolate society from the nature or your environment, and you cannot isolate it vice versa. So that's why we are thinking in the social ecological systems perspective in a cohort system. Then we can think about the infrastructure or something else. And also, I'll talk a little bit, because it's a diverse group. It's not only the class about the resilience. We have multiple disciplines involved. Someone working on different kind of scientific assessment or parameters, something working on labs, something working with fish, someone is working with wildlife. So I'll try to give you a broad overview about this notion of resilience. Okay, so any other thought or any other questions? One more, if you have. No? Okay, great. Thanks all. Thanks, Jack. So now we'll talk about our first part of discussion, sustainability. So in sustainability, when you think about our starting, the human civilization, we were in a primitive stage. Then we were totally dependent on nature for our survival, fooding, clothing, everything. Still we are dependent on nature, but in different format. Then we enter to the agriculture, agrarian society, and agrarian civilization, and we crossed many years, many million years. Then, but when and why we are thinking this sustainability, and when we jump into the industrial civilization after the 1700th century to still today, we are developing our industries, consume a lot, produce a lot, irrespective of our reproductive capacity of our mother nature. So that is the notion why we have to think seriously about the sustainable development, sustainability of our production system, or consuming any kind of environmental services, ecosystem services. So that is the background we have to think about sustainability. So starting this sustainability and the framework, we have to know what is going on till today on the global scale. So that's why I took some figures from recently published IPCC report. I know everyone in university school much more aware about this report, how it is. I have taken a couple of figures from the synthesis report for the policymakers. So you know that AR6 was published in 2023 and provided a very alarming situation for the humanity, for the sustenance on Earth, rather than thinking about the sustainable development. That is the more urgent and prominent issue, how we have to think, we have to behave, we have to act, we have to work for the future generation if you want to get those stage. So if you look at the surface temperature, what was the commitment in Paris Agreement 2015? To keep temperature below 2 degrees, most of the global scale. But some of the developed nations like Canada, we know the United States of America, sometimes ratified, sometimes not. It depends on the political regime shift. We have seen that in the last term during the Donald Trump regime, we don't agree with this agreement. But afterward, when Joe Biden came in power, Democrats, then they again changed this initiative and ratified it. So let's see how it's working on the global scale. We have seen lots of politics on this, about this global climate change aspects and its funding and different kind of modalities. So this is really alarming scenario that we have seen. If we think about after, you have seen that the global surface temperatures changes after 1900, before 1900, one stage. But we have seen only within one decade, it increases 1.1 degrees Celsius. That is really alarming. What we have witnessed in one century or 100 years, it takes less than 1 degree. And if you go back, it's really nominal. But the trend we have seen 2021 to 2020, within one decade, it increased 1.1 degrees Celsius than the previous benchmark. So this is a projection model how if we are still committed to keep below 2 degree, then how would be our emission scenario? We have to keep it very low and low. But what we have seen in the recent decade, that is more than that. The emission scenario, I'll talk, there is another figure about the emission scenario. It increased 3 times than the 2010 benchmark, or more than that in some cases. So what is the scenario that we are waiting for to get the global warming scenario? So we are committed for 1.1 degree, and we also have commitment, many other countries, to keep it below 2 degree. So what would be if it is 3 degree, if it is 4 degree? But based on present scenario, it shows that end of this century, it will be more than 3 degree or about 4 degree Celsius increment. And you will see the whole earth will be burned. You will see the moisture content, you will see the extreme precipitation events. So maybe you have seen a picture that was in your YouTube or in your Google, that after 21st, after it was 2140 or 50, the picture about the New York State is underwater. All near Manhattan and everything is underwater. People have to change their mode of transportation. So we are not expecting this kind of scenario. That's why we have to think seriously about the sustainability issue. So all model is predicting the very worst scenario in all cases. Even if we keep it 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius, still we have seen that is changing based on the latitudinal shift, and you will see less winter, less time, and you will see sometimes extreme weather event. For example, one Hurricane Helen just still going on to Gulf Coast. 192 people died in the United States. We can think about it. We are thinking we are the boss. We can dominate our nature. We can do everything. We know that there are 3 schools. Someone is believing on the anthropocentric approaches. The human are the boss of the all nature. Someone in between, stewardship. Someone in the environmental wisdom school, that we are part of the nature. So if you think different school and compare and contrast, you see how our outlook is changing. People have different kind of perspective about the nature and the controlling the nature, but unfortunately we cannot. We have everything, we cannot do anything. We cannot save a single life. 192 people died within 3 days. So that is devastating. If you go back to the scenario of cyclone or hurricane or typhoon, the same thing in different regions. One cyclone in the region of Pakistan, 1970, it takes more than 500,000 people. It completely washed out a couple of islands in East Pakistan. Now it is in Bangladesh. And again, another single cyclone in 1991, it takes 140,000 people. Many countries don't have this much population too. So we are waiting for a big catastrophe, but we should not expect. So what is the ultimate consequence of this kind of shift? Increasing temperature, one parameter, global warming, that can putting species at risk. And it's predicted that if we see the figure 1972 till today, 69% decline of our biodiversity. Each and every minute, more than 10 soccer field times area is losing from the tropical forest. Within a single year, we lost about 4 million hectares of tropical forest in 2021 to 2022 to 23. If you look the figure fact, that's going to happen. It's not only related with the global warming, it's also related with the man-made catastrophe. It related with our urbanization, our settlement, transportation, exploiting the nature for our well luxury. So you have seen how natural revenge is going on. There is a forest fire. Million hectares of land is burning. In many parts of the world, you have noticed lots of catastrophe that is unprecedented and unwanted. Many parts of the world, they never have experienced those kind of catastrophe, but it's going to happen. It's changing. You have to admit those kind of changes, but we have to act right now. And the same parameter is going on. Everything, you see the deeper and deeper color representing the more drastic changes within the ecosystem, within the species composition, within the soil moisture, topsoil, that is more catastrophic. Let's see, if this scenario is changed, if we are not able to hold the control of this kind of change. So this is the emission scenario. Those who are working with net zero emission, so you can use this graph, and that is also helpful. What is going on right now? If you look at this is the actual figure. That is this will be the past emission 2020-2015, and this is right now the warning or model range for 2015 emissions. So you see, and this. So in 2019 emissions are 12% higher than 2010. If you go back to the Kyoto Protocol Agreement, or if you go back to the Rio Convention 1992, if you go back to the 2015 Paris Accord, nothing gonna happen. Is coming with a big failure, big zero. We have seen the Kyoto Protocol. That was the benchmark of 1990s emission, committed to going down, but it increased tremendously, 3 to 4 times higher than 1990. So still we are committing to limiting the increment of temperature 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius, but how it's going to happen? You see, we are increasing our production system manifold because we need it. We need our luxury. We are doing about this. So if we have to maintain a global temperature increment, this is the lowest possible scenario that we can do. Are we doing on that angle? But we have to do it anyhow. Otherwise, there is no way. You have seen the red. This is really alarming if we continue the emission scenario right now, because in 2019 it is this. So the trend may be the upward, not the downward. But how we can do, that's the question. How we can achieve this target, low emission scenario, that's the food for thought for you. You are the future leader. Yes, please.
I'd like permission to plant a seed of an idea that might seem off topic, but is, in my understanding, is related. So I think that we understand that the global oil companies and the petrostates are driving for more production because they're worried about their profits. They need to deliver returns to their investors. So investors are people who have a pot of money invested in a corporation and then expect more to come back to them. So this process compels economic growth. compelling economic growth in a finite biosphere means that you have to liquidate your stocks, your trees, your metals, your agricultural land, etc. In a phrase, the drive for growth and profits is the thing that is destroying the planet. So I would like to suggest a strategy for overcoming the drive for profits, dividends, interest-bearing loans. And that is for us to mobilize over time to shift to a pay-as-you-go economy. We have to, it would take a long time, but the idea is you fundamentally restructure the economy so that it does not depend upon loans or investments where you get dividends. It's just, you start a business, you retain earnings, you use it to build your business. It's the old-fashioned way of doing things before we ever had loans. It makes the economy go a lot slower. It also relieves those businesses of the imperative to grow and to extract. And so that's the core of my idea. We have to get rid of dividends and we have to get rid of interest-bearing loans and go to a pay-as-you-go system. And that's my statement.
Thanks, Steve. I think you are thinking in line with our leverage point.
I'm sorry?
The leverage point for sustainability. There are major 4 parameters. Basically, parameters are important. So we'll talk about this kind of notion. Thank you. Now, this is another findings, the Resilience Institute in Stockholm. And they do research based on planetary boundaries, how we are crossing. So if you compare and see the scenario, still we are in alarming rate. In 2009, they assessed 7 boundaries, 3 were crossed. The red one, basically yellow to red, that is crossed beyond the carrying capacity of or the overshooting process. Then it counts in 2015, 7 boundaries are assessed and 4 crossed. In 2023, we have seen out of 9 boundaries, we crossed 6. About 60%. Yes.
I got an MBA in sustainability back in 2009, which is when I first finished in 2011. When I first saw this, and it's like incredibly disturbing because I've been following it to see this that many years later. And we have a bunch of people in this room who are a bit younger than me, and I'm really wondering if I don't see changes in the trend, and I've been looking at this stuff for a long time. And I'm just wondering, like, sort of what thoughts, ideas, energy for actually making some real changes, which, people, Donella Meadows, who we're looking at in these leverage points, that was in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff has been going on a long, long time, and it's not changing. So I just see these and I just think, good grief. And I know there's, these papers are also mostly 10 years old, one 16, so they're also older papers. So like, is there stuff that's happening in the interim that's positive? On a large scale, other than on these micro scales where you can dig deep enough, you can find some good things that are going on, but they're not scaling up. And that's what we need. We need a way to scale up those good ideas that are happening.
Right. So the evidence shows that it's not working. We have everything. We are trying to change. We put some enhancement or leveraging the system, but I think the scale we need is not working. Might be some of local level initiatives or intervention works for small scale areas. But in a global scenario, I would say no. But you might have different opinion or different thinking. But in my understanding, in a broader scale, we have seen the alarming scenario. There's a big concern.
So we've got to look for how do we push that positive tipping point? You know, we're headed for a very negative tipping point, but how do we get, you know, where is that leverage and how do we really work it?
This is kind of like previous slides, but on the first graph that you showed, there was like multiple dips in like the time series, right? What did we do in those years that have those dips? Like, I don't know if you can bring back the graph. I think it was like carbon emissions or something. Like, what in those years, like, why can't we just replicate what we did those like 3 years?
Economic crisis.
Yeah.
You know, just think about the global population. If you go back.
So the population was decreasing in that time period?
Or, yeah, it's like economic.
Like, what happened in 1999? I'm not a history person.
No, this is basically the surface temperature that.
Like, what do we do there? Like, why has that not been?
This graph only talking about your global surface temperature, but there are hundreds of causal linkages with this. Why is it gonna happen with this time frame? Because you have seen the global economy. Someone pointed out rightly. We are all countries want to develop, produce more and more, make money more and more, and we can invest this money for the welfare of the population or our country development infrastructure. If you compare your United States 100 years ago back and till today, you'll see the many differences. For this kind of, so what we are doing, we are converting the forest into agriculture, again into this agricultural land and the forest converting for urban settlement or urbanization, road network, infrastructure development, energy. So many things are related with this kind of shift. It's not driven by one day. It takes a long time. But we are in incremental trend right now. Yes, please.
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure whether like that graph is like the best way because it's just like sort of temperature that also changes with like particular years or maybe some years or something like that. But if you look at sort of like the emissions, which is basically like the determinant for like later surface temperature changes, that's really usually like economic crisis. So last one was 2020, then we had 2009 and the financial crisis, then we got like the early 90s, so post-Soviet, and these were like basically the last 40 years the main sort of dips in emissions. And I guess that's probably like really, and I mean that relates to what Stephen said, right? So that's what is driving it. And I mean because you asked about sort of like positive things, and one thing that I would notice, I mean, I watched the debate yesterday. I'm not quite sure anymore about it because they're like basically I think Vance said something like America has the cleanest economy, and I don't know. but something that I would sort of note as a positive change maybe is that there's at least like a little bit of a shift sort of to renewables, right? And or like not a little bit, I mean. Some places more faster than others, but so at least we have this shift. And whether that's enough, we can totally debate. And like it's just sort of looking at like carbon, right? Or mostly only looking at carbon, and that's by far, as we saw in planetary model, is not the whole problem, right? But at least sort of like we're moving towards at least this sort of like energy transition, right? And I mean whether that's going to be sort of like sufficient or whether it's really going to be fast enough, probably not. But I would say that's at least something where I would say, okay, we've got like a little bit of positive change, and like, I don't know, I don't know about the US, but like, I feel like sort of also in the last 10 years that there's been again a rise in sort of like recognition of these issues, like especially also climate issues. And yeah, I don't know. Still weird, like sort of that the first IPCC report came like 30 years ago, and the limits to go 50 years ago, and still so few has changed. But I feel like, I mean, if you search for it, you can find it. A little.
Yeah, and I think we're definitely starting to see a look at this like transition to renewable energy, to renewable like power. I think where some of it gets lost is like some renewable power is really carbon intensive. You know, like you have this rise in electric vehicles and all these companies commitment to be electric by 2030. And things like that, but like lithium is super carbon intensive to mine in South America and ship here, and also ethically fraught. And I do think sort of what Steve said, what everybody said, like I feel like the idea of like interest convergence applies to sustainability. Like until it's in like corporations' best interest to like be actually green. And we've seen a lot of like greenwashing of companies through like carbon offsets and that sort of thing. But until it's like actually financially beneficial for companies to be truly green and not just buy all these carbon offsets, I don't know that we'll see a huge shift. I really, yeah. Go Sam.
Oh, you're gonna,
That's
you're
a
calling
call.
me. Well, just talking about this kind of makes me think of like the whole reduce, reuse, recycle mantra, and like we're very much in like the reusing and, you know, the sustainable, but we're not reducing our consumption is the whole point. And I think what Graham actually made, I think that's a fascinating point, is studying those dips. And we were like, oh, it's economic collapse, that's why it's happening, that's bad. And it's like, that's not really that bad though. Like, some people suffered, but like studying the mechanisms that
Let's go on a
cause those
recession
shifts.
every year until it's
And,
fixed.
like,
Like, this
yeah,
is gonna
right.
be like the number one thing that we are.
So studying how like human
Yeah.
like dips translates to environmental dips, or like I guess positive feedback loop. So the opposite. So I think I immediately was like, oh, it's the economy, Graham. But then I was like, Graham, and then I was like, wait a second, that is extremely interesting. And I was very quick to like just be like, oh well, they're not related. Like economy and environment, and then I'm like, wait, that's the whole point of why we're doing these readings. So thank you for that, and then also thank you, Amelia, for like helping all that together. I guess, are we just popcorning it? Should I like?
Yeah, she raised.
Yeah, I feel like we need kind of like another like space race in like terms of like who can make a form of energy that's like more effective and cheaper than oil. And I read somewhere that like Saudi Arabia was putting a lot of money into like research for like new like forms of energy and how to do it in a greener way, because that's where obviously the kind of like general outlook is going to. So I feel like we need that sort of like competition and urge, like who can produce, like in terms of like geopolitical stuff, like who can produce like a cheaper form of power that's actually like more sought after than carbon, and create that competition to like really drive that energy research. Because like I feel like at this point like coal and like gas and oil are like just the cheapest and like economically speaking best way to do it. So I feel like, I don't know, we need like some more drive to do that. And I think that like geopolitical like tension could be like kind of an outlet for that.
Oh, yes, okay, I'm fine, one by one. I see many.
I have so many thoughts right now. I don't think I'm going to be able to like tie them together very well. But like, one thing I think about is that the U.S. is the #1 producer of oil, and we're 12th in the world for exporting. And at the same time, our renewable resources are increasing. So are our like oil production. And the same is true for China. Like they've done a great job with more renewable resources, but in the interim, they've also opened up a bunch of coal power plants. You know, I think there's the stat out there that if the top 10% wealthiest of the world reduce their consumption to the next 10%, it would decrease consumption, one could say therefore carbon emissions, by 40%. You know, I was like raised with this idea of like, turn off the lights when you leave the room, turn off the water, but like, who's the problem? And then what I don't know is like, worldwide, am I one of the people in the top 10%? Like, I don't know that, you know?
We all are.
Okay, so then like
Maybe
what?
even more.
So then what does that look like for us all to reduce our consumption by 10%? How do we do that at a local level? What are the national policies that would integrate that? One strategy out there, if we could, I don't know, work together across nations. I know that's like a pie in the sky dream, but like if we want to achieve this below 1.5 degrees Celsius increase, I would love to see it less than that, right? Like net zero, maybe even less than that to make up some of the time. We could do that in a case of like, okay, here's how many carbon emissions we can have over a year, and then allocate that per capita per country. And what this does, right, is it's like more carbon intensive countries would have to reduce, but it would also allow less carbon intensive countries to increase their carbon production, which we could translate into an increase in their quality of life. But like, how do we do that without a space race or like Star Trek? I don't know.
Yeah, so I guess people brought this up, so I don't remember where everyone was talking about. But in this article, they talked about restructure, reconnect, rethink. Restructure is like tearing down what's here, including maybe this school we're sitting in, or at least like being very questioning of institutional norms that are out there. And so I think that that's pretty powerful, but really, really difficult because all of us are essentially buried in some sort of institutional norm, and it's hard for us to question where we're at and get out of it. And then along those lines, it was from, I guess, from the seminar class that I missed, Paltry, sharpening the point, and very much talking about the need to really rethink, recalibrate, maybe tear down what's going on, and that maybe it's not such a bad thing, that things are as hard as they are now, and that might be part of what it takes to get us there.
Okay, Steve, then you. Sorry.
So go back to first. What's your name?
Oh, I'm Grant.
Grant.
Yeah.
To go back to Graham's question and
Sam.
Sam's reflection. If there's a state of the economy that's decreasing in its carbon output, then we can look to see, okay, what's going on that permits us to use less energy. What is it? And then the question is, okay, who's suffering as a consequence? And then the question is, how can we ameliorate the suffering so that we can continue doing the things that are reducing the carbon without people suffering? I call it the sufficiency economy. It's not original. That's the word I've chosen. There are other words for it. But with the expectation that with declining use of mineral carbon, a liquid or solid, that your economic activity is going to decline proportionally because the economy is 99% correlated with the amount of energy we use. You use less energy, you're going to have a slower economy. So the question is, if we want to eliminate carbon, then we're going to have a slower economy. So how do we live with a slower economy? And one of the primary, or one of the most important answers to that question is the social safety net. You have to make sure that everybody gets what they need. Also, in a shrinking economy, there's no place for people to park their money to make more money. There's an awful lot of people with a lot of money that they're not going to know what to do with it. And frankly, they've been getting rich off of the liquidation of nature anyway. So I think we have plenty of money around to do the things we need to do. We just need to change the way that we think about things and say, oh, wait, we're not organizing our economy anymore for profit. We're organizing it for the sufficiency of life for everyone.
Okay. Oh, last, yeah, this will be the final.
I don't know if
question.
it was your intention to make this. So I think it's very clear that we know what to do, and you just said it's not working. And just a comment, we are always addressing the events that happen after the patterns, and we should go deep. I don't know if you guys know the iceberg model. We should go deep and target the mentalities. And targeting the mentalities is a generation off. So how we want changes if still schools don't teach children system thinking. So we are making a society of people that most, not us, but most of people don't understand what happens, what are the consequences with the acts we do. So unless we start teaching children system thinking and we have adults and policymakers that can link one thing with other, we are not going to change that.
Wonderful. This discussion is really rich. I learned a lot from you. And yeah, this is the food for thought actually. We have to think seriously. All are nature. You will be the policymaker, you will be the politician, you will be the lawmaker. So you have to think it. And seriously, you have to take a deep dive how we can do these changes. Someone pointed out that 10% population consuming more than 80% of the global resources. And we are the nation, North American people, who have the highest environmental footprint. So, leveraging or leading a life very simple way, that could be one way we can consume less. And we know that we are always referring to the 5R principle: reduce, reuse, recycle, or rethink, those kind of parameters that we can work on. So basically you have to think it. We have time to think about this more and more. Now, this is the last figure from AR6, actually how we are losing the ground about the sustainability and building a resilient world. So, because we have some conditions that is enabling us to think seriously, ensuring the sustainable development goals and thinking it, so how we can do, there are some key points and what are the major barriers or the constraint of that. So if you look at these points, actions and the constraint, then we can think about it, how it's impacting the path of sustainability or path of building a resilient development. So this is the upward, this is the scale that we have seen right now. We are here. So we have multiple scenarios. So the ground is going very, very serious and going downside rather than moving upside. So if we maintain the, especially targeting the global warming scenario, then we are actually losing the ground. And this is very drastic, and how we can think it. That's why this notion, basically, the way of thinking about our sustainable development, sustainability, that is critical at this juncture of our life, because we have lots of evidence and the background information that we are losing the ground. So what are the alternative pathways that we have to think? What intervention we have to think? What kind of action we have to do? That is fundamental. Now, ball is in your court. So again, form couple of groups. I would say count 1, 2, 3, 4. Then there will be 6 groups, and you have to think about these 4 aspects. Then spend another 10 minutes. Okay, you can start from 1,
2, 3, 4, 1, 4,
2,
3, 4, 1, 2,
3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2,
3, 4,
1.
2. Okay. So who belongs to 1? Group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4. Okay. So and last group, we can join with. So there are 4 forms that how you are thinking about sustainability. Number 2, what are the major drivers of sustainability, and now how are you responding?
Great, how are you?
Yeah, so I just went to I have friends in town, so I went to the country.
Oh yeah, I've never been there.
It was pretty fun. And good appreciation. We got the flavor graveyard. Yeah, we'll
good, not too shabby. It's like, can you
How do we define
elaborate the second question a little bit? When you say major drivers of sustainability,
Yeah. Using resources in a way that allows them to last and support the community in which
It's
they're
basically you have to
support,
measure
I
drivers.
guess.
I'm not
But I don't know. I'm sure everyone's definition is a little different.
measure drivers.
Who here does work, their research in like community resiliency and climate change and stuff like that? Anybody? I know you do, yeah.
Yeah,
Yours is a little bit? Okay. What about you? No? Okay. So I'm like I'm a wildlife based, you're wildlife based. What about, okay. Just curious about what everybody's. So what would your sustainability definition be?
I've it started, there is a straightforward definition and a simple definition.
Yeah.
Or distant competitive. There are so many definitions of sustainability. So competitive resilience is absolutely different thing than sustainability.
Yeah.
Sustainability is a part of even the community resilience is broader than sustainability is very specific and in line with the activity what are implemented in the community. But you can also question whether it could be a sustainable solution or not.
Yeah.
Something is, long lasting or something.
Yeah, time is an important element in sustainability.
Not only sustainable like plastic.
Yeah.
Plastic, this is, it will last long, better than any other materials, natural materials. But this is not sustainable because it will affect the environment.
Oh wow, working with people is hard. I feel like working with animals is easy, but with people there's so many dimensions to think about.
You have to think that it is easily at the end of this life, shelf life, it will be in the nature, not like this sustainable like plastics. It will mix to the soil or any form of natural materials, like natural materials. I think that is something sustainable. And also it's not only that you have to think also about just the discussion. If you look at the discussion, it's not only about sustainability. We also talked about economic sustainability. Because if about sustainability will be everywhere. So sustainability, institutional sustainability, so it requires something from reconciliation between this environment and also economic issues.
Which I'm embarrassed to say how little I had thought about that. Like, when I think of sustainability, I'm like, oh, it's because humans are using resources outside of a sustainable way of using. We're going to run out. They're finite. But I never really connected that with I guess I think on some levels, economic growth obviously is driven to the higher gross domestic product, probably the least sustainable practices you're using because you're basically getting the most out of what you produce. So I don't know, I was really embarrassed that I never really thought about that much. So that was also very interesting. So thank you for also making that connection because I've never thought about the from your standpoint of a natural resource and a plastic resource doing the same function. One breaks down, one is using that resource and is kind of locked up that resources for all of time and are not going back. So I don't know, I never thought about it from a production standpoint and the product itself. I don't know. I'm going off on that. Move on.
Yeah, I think you put that really, really well. It seems like such a simple question, but it really isn't.
But why not?
Like Ursula was saying, yes, yeah.
That is all about the consumption. It's determined by the psychology. What to consume, how to consume, and why to consume, something like that. Suppose think of normal t-shirt. It requires more than 15 to 20 liters of water. The whole production of it. Normal t-shirts. How is it affecting these water resources and also the environment and everything. So we have to think how much time I use it and what is the life shelf time of that one particular t-shirt. Those things. So and fully most things that's the psychology and the economy. So I'm spending for that one. That is always the issue. So
Do you guys think that we could achieve sustainability under our current global economic?
I wanted to ask the class and be do you think we can do it? Like, do you think we can do it? And I didn't want to like disenfranchise and disillusion people, but I was like, I genuinely don't see, unless we have a huge kind of like limiting drivers of sustainability is like, we view sustainability as like something that sits adjacent to our lives. Like, I'm going to go out and be sustainable today, or I'm going to practice sustainability today, or like, and I'm like that it should be a constant thing. And so I think like if it's not, and it's so far off of the general public's radar that, and like political and politicians' radar, that I call me a nihilist or something, but I'm not very optimistic at this moment in time.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. If you look at the iceberg model, what you see at the surface, and beneath that, there is the global economic model, political model at the end of that. So yeah, you can think of that on the, but it's our position and how can we influence. Are we in position to influence that one?
That's like what Lindsay was saying, is like we are in the top 10% of the global economy. Like we are those heavy consumers, and I feel like I can't even make a change in my own state or like government, and I'm the big consumer. So how am I supposed to help people that aren't consuming, in like the global south, like that are not being these massive consumers and things? And so I'm like, I'm culpable, and I feel like I'm not even culpable. So how the heck do I do anything else?
And also if you look at this, it's a cycle. It's a cycle because politicians, they're also to some extent helpless. Suppose Trump, Kamala, anyone can say that, okay, in the next 5 years, we are gonna have 20% of our energy. What do you mean? These are hard conditions. It's a big chunk of water. Just let people have. So okay. So we still have election, so we'll try to make people because the voters and the citizens of the country. So yeah, it's very important. It's not only the development but also for the developing countries. Yeah, they'll do the same thing. Okay, I'm trying to ensure every luxury items, every luxury price of you.
In the size of the economy, so it's something.
So it's a cycle. It's we are part of that.
Yep.
So yeah, but we have to find the social actions. We have to find some leverage point. What would be the best leverage point? To address the sustainability issues.
Pretty secure, sort of
I don't really see global energy consumption going down.
It only seems like the mentality that we're currently in is going up. Consume.
big divide.
It's probably really bad, but I think that, I don't know, I feel like it will go down because it has to go down, but I don't think that will happen before something really
Well, I think, yeah, kind of like what Graham was talking about, those dips, so like those were like hard pinches, I guess, in the global, in the big consumers, U.S. Politics and global economy basically were like, economy crash, things like that. So I think it's going to be the, like, we're going, like we're suffering now, but we're really going to suffer before. That has to be the impetus for change, because like other than that, like you.
I wish that we could do without it. Good talking to you. Yeah, okay, good job.
I know, it's just so frustrating. I just like talking about climate.
I'm trading the
You want to learn from you. 4 groups. You can pick one question from here. So group 1, you can think about and share your idea. What are you thinking about your definition of sustainability? Group 1.
Group 1. I feel like we talked about sustainability the whole time.
I think like part of it, like we talked about this idea of like the word sustainability itself, like implies that we're trying to sustain something, and like what are we trying to sustain, and the different ideas of like conservation over time and what that looks like. Like some people have this idea that before the US was ever colonized, it's like this pristine landscape, untouched, wilderness. Like, are we trying to sustain that? Are we trying to sustain like the fact that indigenous people did use and manipulate like the landscape to like serve them and that sort of thing? Like, are we trying to sustain that? Are we trying to sustain what we're doing right now? I hope not. So and then it kept going from there.
Yeah.
We did not get to the other questions.
Yeah, it's a lot of times you think about the resource, and that's what I originally thought, but the more you think about it, it's pretty subjective. Like, there's multiple facets of just life in general that you can sustain and not sustain. It's not just resources, it's communities, it's people, it's individuals, it's a bunch of things that we do.
Wonderful, yes. What's your name, please?
Chris.
Chris.
Yes. John Ehrenfeld was mentioned in the beginning of this article. It's a really wonderful book called Sustainability by Design, and he just suggests replacing the term sustainability with the term flourishing as a way to sort of envision what we want, because sustainability seems like plodding or like maybe difficult, or someone gave an example of, if you were asked about your marriage, would you answer, oh, it's sustainable? Just as a term itself, it might not even be the best and most relevant.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. The next one. What are the major drivers of this issue? Why we are thinking about this sustainability?
We talked about the psychology of just humans, just in general, like convincing people that don't maybe know about stuff like this or are concerned about it. One of the biggest
Behavior
struggles.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah, we approached it from that perspective as well, but also talking about why we're in this situation from scientific research previously. The graph that you show really show that as well. But just the exploitation of resources and extraction, all of those factors that also are connected to our economic development as well, which I'm not super familiar with. But I don't know, everyone else in the group wanted to chime in, and like we were also really talking about the first question for a bit, so not to divulge ideas.
No, it's wonderful. Yeah, it has the major drivers.
So I think we could look at this a little bit philosophically and say, we care about sustainability because we become aware that we're not sustainable. What does not sustainable mean? It means that the ecosystem of the planet is in a dire crisis, and the future that's imagined from that foundation sees mass extinction, it sees human starvation, warfare, and disaster. So we care about sustainability because we don't want that world.
Yeah, this is a little bit similar to what Kyle was saying, but I think Ursula brought up like kind of cultural and like culture at large as a driver of sustainability.
Wonderful. So group 3, you can think about how your work addressing the sustainable solution or something like that you are thinking to do any project or anything, any notions. Group 3. Yes, please.
We didn't necessarily get to this, but just my initial thought on it. I typically do a lot of work in the wildlife field, so obviously I'm kind of thinking on a different axis, but one of the things I think did come up a lot in our conversation is this kind of underlying idea of there is an essential change, and what are we sustaining? Well, it's going to have to look different from what it was. So one of the things that comes up in my field a lot that I have been spending a lot of time thinking about lately is we kind of have to start thinking about novel solutions and different ways of looking at the world that could allow us to move forward into some desirable, flourishing future. So like, yeah, maybe in the face of climate change, the snake can't go where the snake was because it's going to be a desert now. So maybe the snake needs to go north, and we talk about like conservation and abduction, And this can go into the weeds very quickly, but that's kind of one of my thoughts is that when I go out and do the work that I do, I have to be not just looking at what was, but I have to start thinking about what can be.
Yes, please.
So I have a pretty strong opinion about the use of not doing applied work, at least in conservation, to try and answer a management question, then you're not really working towards sustainability. So if you're looking at a system and just studying, like how does, a snake, for example, interact with the ecosystem, unless that snake's, threatened and endangered and you're trying to work with management agency to identify different types of habitat or restoration practices that can be applied to the snake. Just studying the snake in its own right isn't going to be helping the snake for any kind of conservation purposes. And so there's this kind of need for applied research, I think, specifically for sustainable solutions. I mean, I have a conservation background, so that's what I'll address. Where if you're just studying kind of like general biology, I don't think that's being used in any sustainable forum. So yeah, I have a kind of tendency to lean towards applied work, and obviously I'm biased, that's what I do. But I think that's what we need for sustainability to go forward, to actually have research being used by management.
Wonderful. So last group 4. Yes, please.
I mean, it's not a great way to intervene, but we talked a little bit about, and I think it was mentioned in the first reading, how like sometimes upon a shock, like institutions that can adapt will fall. So we're kind of, well, I mean, I guess I can't say we were under the consensus of, but I kind of felt like the general gist was like things are probably going to get worse before they necessarily get better, and sometimes like that initial like total like destabilization of everything as a result of like this cumulative like impact on the earth is gonna like be what actually changes institutions.
Great. Any other
Yeah, this was from one of the readings, but I really like the idea of like reconnecting people to the environment and the natural world. I think we have such a disconnect with that, especially just in recent years, where I think like just getting people really excited about like where we live, the outdoors is like a huge first step. Because like we talk about like, oh, we're gonna lose all these biodiversity, we're gonna lose all these species, but if people really don't give a crap about it, like why do they want to protect it? So I think kind of like a culture change like that is like really emphasizing the importance of the natural world is so
important. Yeah, I think like I don't know. I think it's like obviously there's a million things. I really think about the people, who the people are going to be doing this work, conservation or not. I think like we need more diverse groups like having conversations about this. Like if you look at a majority of the big decision makers and the politicians that make decisions on how we use the natural environment, a lot of them are white men. So like what could we learn if that was not the case? And the other part of that is like I'm not sure that like people do feel disconnected from nature. Like I think certainly some people, but I also think like if you're trying to put food on the table, like who cares if the goldfinch is going extinct? Like if you're trying to feed your kids, if you're trying to work your 2 jobs and that sort of thing. So I do think like economics plays a role in people like having the capacity to care about the environment, care about these issues.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say something similar, and like, but like I think that like the way like having like a wage job is like a huge part of that like.
Okay, this is the final.
I'd like to question the premise of trying to work for a sustainable future. I think that the world that we live in is completely unsustainable. What we need to do is to anticipate the ways in which the fragility of the world and the changes in the distribution of resources are going to impact us, and work for resilience.
That's why Steve is working for polycrisis.
Why what?
Working for polycrisis. Wonderful. So let's take a 5 minutes break. I know some of you need a washroom break or something like that. So we'll come back at 11:21.
Yeah.
Just 5 minutes break. Thank you so much.
I was I've never heard of that.
Doesn't exist in
The kind of middle of the week.
they study
Takes up some time. Is it the villain? It's good. Yeah, that's fair. just here, and then after the pulse, just a lot more. Which is fine. It's a bit redundant to the other part that I took prior to it. So I'm just like, not getting a lot from it. No, just yeah, so it's not quite a JP level. I could probably pursue that pretty easily if I wanted to, but I think I just want to go into policy yeah.
No, so that was undergrad. And then they had.
I like being busy, but sometimes I'm like, all right, what did I do? Environmental studies.
You have to say, okay, how can we so that pressure to expand the population
I'm also very
and then at some point,
at this point, I want like I'm here to study a specific topic as part of so we only got one more required class.
that's my reading.
Honestly, I like those. I did one of those in the summer. We went out on the UAE boat a few times. We were together staying in it. We were there for a big part of the and we were a little nervous we were going back to the state because so many of the roads we had to take vans to get back to the and we just ended up going around a big like hole in the pavement. So that was interesting. I was like, oh, he has the
I didn't get to sign the card yet.
Can I use your real one? Yeah, no.
Okay, so
Not today.
we'll continue based on our topic and discussion. Let's see how we can go. Now we learned a lot about our thinking, how we think sustainability, what are the major drivers, and how it relate our work, and how we can intervene in this system. So this is basically just thinking. I know different people have different kind of research, different kind of focus, different kind of interaction with the society and the nature. So let's have a look about the United Nations-led initiatives for sustainability that comes along. That I mentioned after the Industrial Revolution, we are losing the ground of sustainable management of our, especially our Mother Earth, that we are impending with different kind of disasters, the shocks and stresses. So if just look after the Second World War, we have seen it just initiation of thinking sustainability and sustainable development. If you look at the bullet point in 1948, basically the International Union for the Protection of Nature was founded. That was the strong beginning to think the nature and natural connection, because we are exploiting our nature, and we are producing a lot based on this natural base. But in 1954, the Harris Brown published the Challenges of Man's Future. That was pivotal, and it laid the foundation for sustainable development. Later, we have seen that it was materialized through the outcome of this, our common future. This is the Broadland Commission report, and that was published in 1987, basically after the Stockholm Conference. Then this was the UN-led biggest ever initiative and starting point to think sustainable development and how we should manage, how we have to think. Then this is the final outcome of this 1972 Stockholm Conference for Environment so this afterward we have seen the another biggest event, the Rio Convention. That was the CBD Council, the Convention on Biological Diversity. Then this is another big landmark. But in between we have seen there was a Kyoto Protocol in 1996, and then afterward we have seen a big failure. There was a timeline for 20 years. And then we have seen the Millennium Summit in 2000 and 2002, the World Summit on Sustainable Development in the Johannesburg, South Africa. Then we have seen another biggest event in 2015, Paris Accord. This is basically the Sustainable Summit, and it is also connected with the climate change aspects. We have known about the accord is the Paris Accord that came out in 2015. But when you think about the sustainable development, the landmark is that in 2016, following the 17 goals for sustainable development, 169 activities, interventions were proposed. But then we have seen lots of parameters of the measuring scale were set, and who ratified all countries, they are bound to report based on their goals, based on the progress of their respective goals and development. But we have seen the fluctuation in their parameters. Some of the countries still facing lots of resource gap. They have limited skill set and resources. Some we don't have many goals to touch, but unless major environmental climate change or something. So we have seen different countries have different kind of priorities based on 17 goals. But this is just food for thought and how we are thinking in line of our sustainability, in line of our development initiative in future. So now, again, I am coining the definition from this book, the Broadland Commission's report, how they define the sustainable development or sustainability. Then it comes forward about our thinking about the development sustainability. So their definition was meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generation to meet. So there is some ambiguity, some kind of tweaks are there, meeting the present need. So yes, we are meeting our present need, but we are not thinking the future. That what we have seen, that was the foundation about the AR6, the IPCC report, that our consumption, our production system, our utility, our exploitation, how it leading to a drastic change for future generations. That is the thinking, food for thought, that how we have to think about. But there are some critics are there. because how we are setting the goal or how we are setting our need right now, in what scale, in what parameters we have to set or assess this need. There is lots of debates are there, and you'll see whenever you read any kind of articles relating this kind of debate, you'll see lots of argument, lots of thinking about what is waiting future for us. So, for example, Steve was talking about the demographic transition model. It was said that right now we are more than 7 billion people in the world. If we only think one parameter, the population growth, what will be the end of 21st century? Right now, China is leading with its population, but end of 21st century, who will lead? Any guess?
India.
India will be the highest populous country in the world. Who will be in second rank? Who? China? Might be, but it was predicted that Nigeria will be in the second rank based on their population pyramid. You know, the base, the age of 0 to 14. That's the major base for demographic transition model. But we have crossed COVID-19. We lost many people, but we are not sure. That is linking us to the notion of sustainability to the resilience. Because in resilience thinking, connecting with the social ecological systems perspective, there is a big driver is the uncertain future. We don't know, but we are putting the existing data in the model. We have seen that end of this 21st century, the global population might be 9 to 10 billion people, might be, but it might be less. Yes, please.
There's some interesting models I've looked at recently that actually show that global population will be around maybe 4 billion people at that point in time, which changes the equation.
And
because there's decreasing, generally worldwide, the fertility rates are decreasing. China's a big part of it, but in the United States and in Europe and those countries, we actually have decreasing fertility rates.
Right.
So,
yeah. Most of the developed nations, they are maintaining the population growth by the immigration, like Canada, like I think I'm not pretty sure about the United States, but I know about many things. This 1.5% they are maintaining by the immigration. Same thing happening in the European countries. Many countries they are negative, some are zero. So that might be possible, but we have seen the drastic growth in the Asian and the African countries. But some catastrophe can take a great balance, or it can be declining. But that's why we are uncertain about the future. That is the notion we have to think about. But we have to think based on the current situation. We should not wait for this kind of disaster. Okay? Yes, someone will say. Is that okay? Okay, so this is the definition, and there are lots of operational definitions of sustainability. Someone is thinking for what? For resource management, for production system, for consumption, or other kind of distribution model. So it depends. That's why you have seen the use of this sustainability is widespread. For every school, every field, they are using this terminology. Some are using in this dictionary meaning, some are operationalizing based on the nature of their work or their need.
Yeah, I just want to know whether, I don't know whether you're also going to talk about different definitions, but the problem that I have with this model, at least, is that it doesn't show any embeddedness, and it sort of assumes that society, economics, and environment operate on a similar level, and there's not this embeddedness that the environment sustains the other two.
Actually, I'm not taking very deep dive about this model. This is more kind of super general thinking. Basically, we are just giving an idea, pillars of how it's starting and merging with together with each other, and how we should think and setting some the measure and the parameters to measure the sustainability progress. So yeah, you will see lots of articles are coming, flooding in our scholarly domain about this kind of analysis, specific to the broader scale, larger scale, local to the global initiative. So yeah, it depends how you think, how you develop, because all are, but this is the basic model that we are thinking in case of sustainability. Then, what the emphasize on sustainable development, basically it comes through this Broadband Commission report, just I'm linking, and this sustainability is a process. It's changing. You have seen the notion is changing. Back to your point, it's changing based on your research, based on your priority, based on your modus of operandi or something like that. But it's not something you have to stick to with this one. But based on time is changing. Our thinking also changing and operationalizing, and also we have seen that different kinds of need is coming along. There's something, for example, in our fashion, we are changing over time. In our iPhone, right now is the iPhone 16, is not iPhone 1 or 2. It's changing over the time. Our preference also changing. Someone is coming near, we are right now jumping in. We don't think about something that we are living. So this is super general model, basically 3 pillars: economy, society, and the environment. And the merging ground is we are thinking that when these 3 prior pillars merge together, that is sustainable. Beyond this, we have seen the different kind of unsustainable thinking. And also, when 2 pillars merge together, we have seen some kind of, for example, economy and the environment, and we have seen the economy and the society and the environment. And the point that I mentioned, basically measuring how we are measuring economic growth, economic development. I know that most of the countries, they use the GDP percentage. GDP country is their main parameter, or how they are thinking about their R&D. That's why we have seen different kind of innovations is coming along to make a huge profit. Again, when we think about the environmental system, then we have to think about the natural resource base and how we are conserving our biodiversity and preventing our system from the different kind of pollutions. So in the same case in the social safety net, so that also brings us to the bearable condition, viability, and livability within the society. So there is some merging ground. But important thing right now, when you see some of the recent articles, they are really critical, thinking about the missing leg of sustainability. That is the ethics, that is the values, that is the cultural perspectives. So that is, you have to think, and this is emergent. This is emergent because we are missing this leg. That's why we have someone mentioned about the traditional ecological systems, traditional ecological knowledge, perspective from the indigenous people, and merging together. So this is the missing ground, and cultural shift is really important to maintain the sustainability on the earth, because different culture, different ethnic group, different people have different kinds of notion, different kinds of understanding. For example, the indigenous people, they treat this nature, Mother Earth. They treating it as a mother because we are taking everything from our Mother Earth. What we are giving back to that? So that is a fundamental question. So that is this notion also linking towards the notion of environmental wisdom. We are the mere part of the nature, rather than we are the boss of the nature. We are the manager of the nature. We are a mere part of the nature. Every species has its own right and responsibilities to live on Earth, to live on and sustain on Earth. But so that is the notion that we have to think seriously about the cultural aspects and the ethical ground. Do you have any question? Anything else? Yes, please.
Yeah, I guess just also thinking about, I know this is just supposed to be like a basic framing, but in our smaller group, we were talking about degrowth and sort of different, economic conceptions that if you don't follow that like growth profit, and like the SDGs also like looking for like inclusive sustainable growth and kind of questioning that as a development goal.
Right. Yes.
I think
think it's just interesting on like the timeline slide that it took us almost 70 years to get from the creation of the UN to these 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So I guess on my, not really question, is just like a concern is that doesn't seem like a very sustainable timeline for implementing like major change across global economies. So I don't know, disheartened. Yes, Chris, alleviate some of
I would just say one
thing
thing not to worry about is that it's not linear and that there will be some sudden shifts and changes. So you won't have to wait another 7 years.
Right.
So-
That is also systems thinking. Please connected with your systems thinking. Okay. Anything else?
Yes. Yeah, just, I mean, and they were also going before, right? I mean, UN had also goals like global. So they were also sort of like, they had the aspect of sustainability in there. So, yeah. It's just, I mean, yeah. And you can debate whether these are good goals. Maybe that's okay. Yes, please.
For me, the main problem of the models are that without environment, we don't have society or economics. And over there, environment is just a part. It's not everything. So.
Yeah, it's covering all. We are, society is a part of environment, economy is a part of environment. But just when you think about isolation and margin ground, that brings us the notion of sustainability, and we have to think it. This is for our understanding. It's not that we are out of the environment. Everything is out of the environment, but it's a part of the environment. Yes. Steve?
So I'm wondering how much of the sustainability, or how, the community of people that care about sustainability, do they still believe in growth? Because growth and profit are part of one of these three pillars. And if you took growth out of the equation, would you lose a lot of people?
Yeah.
Yes. See, because that's the core of the problem.
Yeah.
Something that was brought up in one of our small group discussions today was like, why is it all about the economy? Why is it all about money? And I think that like there is such a fixation, right, as like on that as a measurement of success, and it would be a real big paradigm shift to make something else a measurement of success. Like we were talking about this earlier in the class, but like sustainability or like the happiness index, but how it like you one country can't do that alone, right? Because then we'd be missing out. So one of the questions I have, right, is like how do we change the existing power structures, like not only within our own country, but across like multinational countries to be more cooperative and less combative for a common good. And it's like, in some ways, like climate change is perfect, right? Like it is the common enemy that can unite us. And instead we're like, meh. Like I felt that way about COVID too, right? Like that was the thing. We could all get together, work together, come up with a solution. And instead, because of a few power holders, right? And one of the things I think a bunch about is like, there's a small organized group of people that control so much, and to counterbalance that, you don't need just like 10 people to do that. You need like 20,000 times that amount, like because of the power that they hold, which is so closely connected to the economy, and like that dollars are just symbols of power.
Great point. Just to add something to the positivity that we're looking for, I think
Appreciate that. No, that's good. That's good.
No,
Bring it
I'm
back.
not saying you're, I get really optimistic when I think about the sustainable food movement, because it happens in the local communities, right? It's these people making changes within their own communities, and that's grown to be a movement that is touching people like across the country now, across the world, but that incorporates society and economics and environment. You have, people knowing where their food comes from, gardening, farmers markets, like that's just one piece. And the agroecology, I think, is a really optimistic field.
So I'm just thinking of some sort of society that's not very much focusing on economics, very much on society and environment. So I learned to two particular group, this type of people, this type of society where economy is not important. You know, one is the Auroville. It is in India. So they are everyone is equal. They are very much focusing on environment and they produce their own food. And also it is shared based on their level, how much they are engaging in their activities and everything. Economy is very much the minor issue. And another society I've learned is in Austria. So this is almost the same thing. And I learned this farming when I was talking with Julie, first MSc student here. So she was talking about something like that they live in a society, something like that, that everyone is, everyone is engaging, they're growing on all those things, but economy is more important. But Auroville, the economy is a very minor issue there. You'll find lots of YouTube videos on that, you can go and check. So I'm just thinking of that. So I just find that they are very much, they're robotic. They don't have any inspiration, they don't have any desire, and any kind of, the attraction to life or something like that. They are just surviving. So is it possible for all of us to just surviving rather than, to get some inspiration, to get some motivation of living and all those things? I think economy to some extent, they give that motivation, this attraction to survive. But if you look at the Auroville, they are just surviving. I don't feel that kind of attraction to the rest of life. So yes, economy is not important to them. They're getting food, they're living a life, but I can't think of that one. So if it is if to take that as an example, or you want to scaling up or implement in other areas, if that has some kind of attraction to by the other peoples, I thought that this example could be adopted by the other people, other parts of the country, and we can see the more, the way we are defining the sustainability very much in line with that one. So yeah, we could be sustainable. We could live sustainable in that way if we adopt life like Auroville or life a community like living in the Austria, where they're sharing everything. Economy is a minor issue rather than environment and society, community relationship is priority.
Okay, oh, Jack, please.
Oh, okay, yeah. Thanks. So two thoughts. One is I'm sensing like a strong desire collectively to see examples of things that actually work. So I'm going to create a document on our Brightspace page, just a link. It might be a Google Doc or a Teams page that you can edit, and I'll do that right after class, or maybe just in the next few minutes, and encourage you all to post just examples of things that do seem to be working. Communities that are doing things differently, solutions, things like that. Because I do think it's really important to have examples of it's possible to do things differently. Just, as inspiration for our work, but also just emotionally, it's pretty intense. So that's one thing I just want to put out there. The other thing, kind of the other side of that coin, and I'm sort of stepping outside of the conversation right now, and making a different kind of observation, but in my own life, spending most of my professional adult life engaged in the environment, ecology, natural resources, and like being face to face with this for a long time, I do think that there's like an emotional or psychological component to this too. That like we can't really be effective if we don't also do the internal work of recognizing that yes, it's possible that things can turn around and change, and we are going to lose a lot, and we already have, and it's absolutely inevitable that there's going to be a lot of loss in terms of species, landmass, humans, and so like there I think there is a component of having to do the work of really accepting that, things are going to change dramatically, and there is going to be a loss, and how do you do the work to actually grieve that and incorporate that so that you can have a mature, clear-eyed view, and you're not just like kind of in this like panic mode, like we got to find a solution, this is too much to handle. And I think that actually, and I mean, if you look at like grief psychology and things like that, there's like the stages of grief, and it's like humans can experience a lot of loss and it's really hard, but you actually can move through it and accept it and come out the other side and be okay. And so I think there is part of this work too, like what do you need to do? What do we all need to do that work to actually, in a mature way, face the reality? You know, and that doesn't mean we lose hope that we can change things, but given what's already happened and what's going to happen in the next year, for example, to do that work, to grieve or whatever you want to call it, so that you can approach the work from a balanced place, not in this place of denial, like, you know, we gotta fix this now and in an unrealistic way.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. I really appreciate that. Yeah, if you have come across with any place-based initiative or example, so do share with us and upload in the private space. And we have seen that there is conversation about this issue that really,
Chris, do you have last minute thoughts? I was just going to piggyback on that and encourage everyone to look at John Ansel's book and his recent writing. He talks a lot about that internal work that's necessary individually, but also sort of psychologically. And then the other thing is just, I got a little answer, I think, to my question, having people react to this, that when I first saw this sort of three-legged stool thing, most people were like, oh yeah, that makes sense, it makes sense. We've got these, disparate disciplines. They're trying to like mush them, mash them up together and find something. But that doesn't seem to be where most people land anymore. Most people are like, we've got to go in this road, or like, we've got to go further than this. So I think that's, for me, that's sort of positive change over the last 15 years, sort of specifically, that I've been looking at this stuff, is that this model, people don't buy it anymore, which I think is good, because it's, it's kind of rusty.
Great. Thank you. So move on to the next. Actually, I will finish the sustainability part here, because then in our next class, maybe not next week, the following week, I'll cover the rest of the part. So why this framework is important and why it's not working, that is a fundamental question. That some of you are thinking why it takes a long time after Bradley Commission report to 2016 to set up these sustainable development goals, and how it's working till today. And we are waiting for Agenda 2030 to see the progress of this goal. So the framework basically giving us some of metrics or indicators to assess the sustainability of the system is not that we are steady. I mentioned that this process is a process and it's evolving on time and based on the demand and the need of the people and the society. So the framework just giving some kind of metrics and indicators to assess the progress, and it also helps us to set up the benchmark of how we can measure. Based, if you don't have the benchmark, then it is really hard to measure the progress. So it is providing some sorts of measure standard to assess the sustainability. And it also provides some communication. You are thinking about this geopolitics, global policies. How, why someone is not adopting this kind of goal, why this country is adopting that goal. And so we have seen lots of debate in global phenomena. Who is prioritizing what, or why, and what the reason why they are not accepting. For example, if you think about the Paris Accord, some of the countries don't agree with this. Which of the nations that we are thinking the emerging tiger in the economic sense? There are 4 countries, it is said that those are the emerging tiger. The United States of America, the Brazil, India, and there is another country, I just forget about it. So those are the nations, China. These 4 countries called the super emerging tiger in economic sense. But you have seen, most of the cases, they are not caring about the environmental resources or exploiting the resources for their economic growth and development. So sometimes they are not complying with this kind of global initiative, and those poor countries or the developing countries, they are jumping in right away, maybe to get some incentive from this kind of initiative. So lots of dynamism is going on, and the reaction chemistry is really hard to understand. Some are saying in the global forum, we will do that, but when he is back to the country is doing nothing. So those kind of fabrication and commitment we have seen in the global forum. So there are some examples how we are measuring this progress. Is basically, you know, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and also the CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project, Global Reporting Initiative, and maintaining the ISO standard for environmental management system. So those are some of the examples how we can measure the progress towards sustainability. Now come to the point why we failed. First of all, the agreement on definition. Then what we are targeting, meeting the present need without compromising the future demand or the future generations. So meeting, we have need. Need is endless. In economic sense, need is endless. You cannot fill the vacuum. So there are some of disagreement within the definition, the benchmark about, but so you have seen that some countries taking it as an advantage, some are not. So there are lots of disagreement, and again, most important thing is the political will. That is more important because some countries I mentioned about for the sake of economic growth and development, we don't care about. Some of the countries don't care about this kind of environmental pollution, exploitation of the resources, converting their forests to the agriculture or different sorts of utility services or the production system. Number two, difficult to operationalize and control production and consumption. That is the fundamental link. We have to produce more, we have to consume more, we have a huge demand on that, so we are not caring about the issues of sustainability and about our mother nature, the care. And sustainability is not prioritized over other challenges or not integrated within the system. When you think about the leverage point, we have seen that some of the components we can integrate, for example, the institutional mechanism, policy making, drafting an act or the rule. So we are not prioritizing this sustainability issue within some of the system. I'm thinking about the global scale rather than the local scale. The fourth one is the lack of strategies, instrument, and the knowledge to accomplish. It depends country to country. It depends society to society based on their resource capability and the constraint and their some kind of knowledge co-creation or creation. And also linking with the poly-crisis, the multiple crises we are facing each and every day. Some countries facing war, some of the countries are facing drought, some are excessive rain, flooding, hurricane, different kind of environmental catastrophes and disasters. Some we have seen some country is overburdened with its population, cannot maintain bread and butter for its population, cannot ensure their health, cannot ensure some other social well-being or the safety net. So that's why you have seen many cases the progress towards sustainability is really slow. Okay, I'm going back to the next one. This is your reading basically, and you already mentioned about the three realms of the sustainability: reconnecting to the nature, and reconstructing or restructuring the institutional framework. There are formal and informal organizations are there. So some have own rules and responsibilities. Some are depends on its taboos, cultural practices, norms, social norms, and practices. So those are the informal organizations. And also rethinking now how we can create or co-create knowledge that is really helpful to ensure our sustainability. And there are four aspects that the characteristics that we have seen. These two is really deep, based on Meadows article, based on Epson's article, based on further Fisher's article. So we have seen that we are doing this stage, but we are still waiting for taking the deep action for our sustainability. And this is followed by this diagram. And we are, if we think about the system, we are just starting point rather than we are coming to the intent and designing. So this is more hardest part, changing the behavior, coming back to our first discussion, the change the outlook, change the behavior, change the perception, and anything else. So I'm stopping here today. We'll go back next work in your our resilience thinking notion next class. So if you have come across, if you have any questions, just shoot me an email. We can meet and we can discuss in our next class. So giving heads up about our next class, we have faculty spotlight next week. 4 faculty from the State School will be here. Each of them will take 25 minutes. I am taking 5 minutes for transitioning to each other. So that means they will take the whole class. 4 faculty, 2 hours, including 5 minutes break. And your presentation group, basically the seminar group, I see except there are, this is the group. So please talk to your group member based on the group. I think Steve is missing, right? I'm sorry.